The dust from the funeral procession had barely settled when Victoria Walsh heard the words that would haunt her for months to come, spoken by her late husband's sister in a voice that carried across the sparse gathering like a rattlesnake's warning through dry brush. "You are too broken now, Victoria, shattered beyond repair, and no decent man will ever want what remains of you." The year was 1878, and Oro Grande, New Mexico, was a town that dealt in harsh truths as readily as it dealt in silver and cattle. But those words cut deeper than any blade Victoria had ever known. She stood there in her black dress, the fabric stiff with dust and grief, watching as they lowered Thomas into the hard earth. 3 years of marriage, ended by a stray bullet during a cattle dispute that never should have turned violent. Thomas had been 32, she was 24, and now she was alone in a territory that showed no mercy to the weak or wounded. The wind whipped across the cemetery, carrying the scent of sage and creosote, and Victoria felt something inside her go cold and still as stone. The Walsh family had never truly accepted her. She had come from nothing, the daughter of a failed merchant who had drunk himself to death when she was 16. Thomas had seen something in her, though, something worth loving, and he had married her despite his family's objections. Now he was gone, and they looked at her with eyes that said she was just another burden, another problem to be solved or dismissed. Margaret Walsh, Thomas's sister, approached her after the burial, her face pinched with something that might have been pity but looked more like disgust. "The house was Thomas's before you married, which means it reverts to the family. You have until the end of the month to find other arrangements." Victoria's throat tightened, but she refused to let the tears come. "I understand. Do you?" Margaret's voice dropped lower, meant only for Victoria's ears. "You are damaged goods now, Victoria. A widow with no children, no family, no prospects. The grief has carved hollows in your face and taken the light from your eyes. You look like a ghost, and you will live like one. No man in this territory will take on another man's widow, especially not one as broken as you." The words landed like physical blows, but Victoria straightened her spine and met Margaret's gaze without flinching. "Then I will manage on my own." Margaret's laugh was bitter. "We will see how long that lasts." 3 weeks later, Victoria found herself living in a small room above the general store, working 12-hour days to pay for her lodging and meals. The store owner, Mr. Henderson, was a decent man who had known Thomas and felt sorry for the widow, but sympathy only stretched so far. Victoria swept floors, stocked shelves, helped customers, and tried not to think about the future stretching before her like an endless desert. The other women in town treated her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. Widows were unlucky, everyone knew that, and bad luck had a way of spreading. They would nod politely when they saw her but never lingered to talk. The men either ignored her completely or looked at her with calculations in their eyes that made her skin crawl. She was unprotected now, vulnerable, and some men saw that as an opportunity rather than a tragedy requiring compassion. October brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of the winter to come. Victoria was closing up the store one evening, her hands raw from scrubbing floors, when she heard raised voices outside. She peered through the window to see a group of men gathered around someone on horseback. The rider was tall and lean, sitting his horse with the easy confidence of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in the crowd. "We do not want your kind here," one of the men shouted. "The marshal made it clear last time." "You cause trouble, Strickland. Always have and always will." The rider said something Victoria could not hear, his voice low and calm, which only seemed to anger the crowd more. She recognized some of the men, including Robert Hayes, who owned the saloon and had a reputation for a mean temper when he had been drinking. "You think you can just ride in here after what happened in Silver City?" Hayes demanded, stepping closer to the horse. "Your brother shot a man over a card game and you helped him escape. That makes you an accomplice, far as the law is concerned." The rider's voice carried this time, deep and steady. "My brother was acquitted and you know it. The shooting was self-defense, witnessed by half a dozen people. I did not help him escape. I helped him get to trial, which is what any decent man would do for family. You are a troublemaker, Strickland, just like your father before you." Victoria watched as the situation deteriorated, more men joining the crowd, their voices rising. The rider remained calm, but she could see the way his hand rested near his belt, ready to move if necessary. She should have stayed inside, kept out of it, but something about the man's stillness in the face of aggression reminded her of Thomas, who had never looked for fights but never backed down from injustice either. Before she could second-guess herself, Victoria grabbed the shotgun Mr. Henderson kept behind the counter and stepped outside. The sound of the door opening drew attention, and several heads turned her way. "That is enough," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Whatever quarrel you have with this man, it does not need to be settled in the street like common thugs." Hayes turned on her, his face flushed with whiskey and anger. "This is not your concern, Mrs. Walsh. Go back inside." "I will not. You are disturbing the peace and blocking the road. Either take your grievance to the marshal or move along." "Listen to the widow," someone muttered, and there was cruel laughter in the words. The rider's eyes met hers for the first time, and Victoria felt something shift in her chest. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds over the mountains, and there was something in them that spoke of weariness and wariness in equal measure. He looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. There was a scar along his left cheekbone, pale against his sun-bronzed skin. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I appreciate the intervention, but these men have made their position clear. I will be moving on." "Where will you go?" The question escaped before Victoria could stop it. "Does it matter?" His smile was sad and brief. "There is always another town, another place where maybe the past does not follow quite so fast." Hayes spat into the dust. "See that you keep riding, Strickland. We do not need your kind in Oro Grande." The crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves, and the rider gathered his reins. He looked at Victoria one more time, and she saw something flicker in those gray eyes, a question or perhaps a thank you, before he turned his horse and began to ride slowly down the main street. Victoria stood there with the shotgun in her hands, watching him go, and felt an inexplicable sense of loss. She did not even know his full name, just Strickland, and yet something about the encounter had pierced through the numb shell she had built around herself since Thomas's death. Mr. Henderson appeared in the doorway behind her. "You should not have gotten involved, Mrs. Walsh. Those men will remember that." "I know," Victoria said quietly, watching the rider disappear into the gathering dusk, "but I could not just stand by." That night, lying in her narrow bed above the store, Victoria could not stop thinking about the stranger. His calm in the face of hostility, the sadness in his eyes, the way he had thanked her even though her intervention had likely embarrassed him in front of men already looking for reasons to despise him. She wondered what his story was, what had happened in Silver City, whether his brother really had been innocent or if family loyalty had blinded him to the truth. She wondered if he had anyone waiting for him, anywhere to call home, or if he was as alone in the world as she felt. The next morning brought unexpected news. Mr. Henderson's wife had taken ill during the night, seriously enough that he needed to take her to Santa Fe to see a proper doctor. "I will be gone at least a week, maybe 2, he told Victoria. "I hate to ask this of you, but would you be willing to mind the store while I am gone? I will pay you extra, and you can sleep in our quarters rather than that cramped room upstairs." Victoria agreed immediately. The extra money would help, and the responsibility would keep her mind occupied. Mr. Henderson left that afternoon, his wife wrapped in blankets in the back of their wagon, and Victoria found herself alone in charge of the general store. The first few days passed uneventfully. She opened at dawn, served customers throughout the day, and closed at sunset. The work was exhausting but satisfying in its own way. At least when she was busy, she did not have time to dwell on Margaret's words or the emptiness of her future. On the 4th day, the stranger came back. Victoria was organizing a shipment of dry goods when the door opened, and she looked up to see him standing in the entrance, hat in hand, looking uncertain in a way he had not appeared when facing down an angry mob. "Madam," he said, "I hope I am not intruding. I was hoping the store might have some supplies I need." "Of course," Victoria said, setting down the crate she had been lifting. "What are you looking for?" He moved into the store with careful steps, as if worried about taking up too much space. In the better light, she could see more details, the way his clothes were worn but clean, the careful mending on his shirt, the quality of his boots despite their age. This was a man who took care of what he had, who worked with his hands and did not waste resources. "I need ammunition, some coffee, flour if you have it, and a new cinch for my saddle. The old one is about to give out." Victoria nodded and began gathering the items. "I thought you were leaving Oro Grande." "I tried." His voice was rueful. "Made it about 20 miles north before I realized I am tired of running. I have been moving from town to town for near 2 years now, and I am weary of it. Figure it is time to make a stand somewhere, even if that somewhere is not particularly welcoming." "That seems like a hard way to live." "It is." He watched her measure out the coffee, his expression thoughtful. "Can I ask you something, Madam Victoria? My name is Victoria Walsh. Jackson Strickland." He nodded, a formal introduction in a strange setting. "Can I ask why you stepped in the other night? You did not know me, and those men could have turned on you." Victoria was quiet for a moment, weighing her words. "I have had people say cruel things to me recently, make judgments about who I am and what I am worth based on circumstances beyond my control. I suppose I recognized something of that in what they were doing to you. It did not seem fair." Jackson's eyes softened. "You are Thomas Walsh's widow. I heard about what happened. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you." The words were automatic, something she had said so many times they had lost meaning. "Did you know him?" "Not well, but we met a few times at cattle auctions. He seemed like a good man." "He was." Victoria felt the familiar tightness in her chest but pushed through it. "Let me get that cinch for you." As she searched through the tax supplies, Jackson spoke again. "I heard the Hendersons had to leave town suddenly. You are managing this place alone, just for a week or 2. I work here anyway, so it made sense." "That is a lot of responsibility." Victoria found the cinch and brought it to the counter along with the other supplies. "I can manage." "I do not doubt that." Jackson pulled out money to pay, counting it carefully. "I am staying at the old Peterson place about 5 miles east of town. The house burned down years ago, but the barn is still standing. Not much, but it keeps the rain off. If you need anything, any help around here, I am available. I owe you for the other night." "You do not owe me anything." "Maybe not, but the offer stands regardless." He gathered his supplies and settled his hat back on his head. "Thank you, Victoria." The way he said her name with care and respect made something warm flicker in her chest for the first time in months. She watched him leave, and this time when he rode away, she knew he would be back. Over the following days, Jackson became a regular presence at the store. He would stop by every morning, ostensibly to buy something small, coffee or tobacco, or a handful of nails, but Victoria began to suspect the purchases were an excuse. They would talk while she worked, conversations that started carefully, both of them testing the waters, and gradually became more honest and open. She learned that Jackson was 28, that his family had once owned a ranch in Texas before a combination of drought and bad luck had forced them to sell. His brother, Marcus, had moved to Silver City to try his hand at mining, and Jackson had followed to keep an eye on him. The shooting in the saloon really had been self-defense. A gambler with a reputation for cheating had pulled a gun when Marcus called him out, and Marcus had been faster. The trial had been fair, and Marcus had been acquitted, but the gambler had friends, and those friends had made life difficult enough that both brothers had decided to move on. Marcus headed to California, Jackson told her one morning while she swept the floor. Wanted me to come with him, but I was tired of following his choices. Love him, but my brother has a talent for finding trouble. Figured it was time I made my own way. And you chose to make it here in a town that does not want you. I chose to stop running, Jackson corrected. There is a difference. Besides, the land around here is good. There is a section of valley about 10 miles from town, near a creek that runs year-round. Nobody has claimed it far as I can tell. I thought I might try to homestead, build something that is actually mine. Victoria paused in her sweeping. That is a big undertaking for one person. It is. Jackson met her eyes. But I have been alone for a long time now. I am used to it. There was something in the way he said it that resonated with Victoria's own loneliness. She found herself looking forward to his morning visits, the sound of his voice, the way he listened when she talked, really listened, as if her words mattered. It had been so long since anyone had treated her as if she were more than just an unfortunate circumstance to be managed or avoided. The Hendersons returned after 12 days, Mrs. Henderson looking pale but improved. The doctor said she needs rest and good food, Mr. Henderson reported. We cannot thank you enough, Mrs. Walsh. The store looks better than when we left. Victoria deflected the praise, but she was proud of what she had accomplished. She had managed everything, handled difficult customers, even fixed a broken shelf without assistance. It felt good to be competent, to be useful in a way that went beyond simple survival. When Jackson came by that afternoon and heard the Hendersons had returned, his face fell slightly. I suppose you will be back to your regular duties then. I suppose so. I will miss our morning conversations. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Victoria felt her heart beat faster. They do not have to stop. You could still come by. I could. Jackson smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and less burdened. I would like that very much. November arrived with cold winds and the promise of winter. Jackson continued his daily visits, and Victoria found herself thinking about him during the hours they were apart. She noticed small things, the way he always held the door for other customers, how he was patient with Mrs. Chen, who spoke limited English and sometimes took a long time to find the words she needed. He treated everyone with respect, regardless of how they treated him, and slowly, very slowly, some of the townspeople began to thaw toward him. It was Marshal Taggart who first made overtures of acceptance. He came into the store one afternoon when Jackson was there and nodded a greeting. Strickland, heard you are planning to homestead the East Valley section. Jackson straightened, wary. That is my intention, yes, sir. Good land there if you can manage the work. Going to need to file proper paperwork in Santa Fe. I am aware, planning to ride out there next week. The marshal nodded slowly. I also heard you helped the Patterson family when their well collapsed last week. Got it working again without asking for payment. They needed help, and I had the knowledge. Did not seem right to charge them when they are already struggling. Marshal Taggart studied Jackson for a long moment. Maybe I misjudged you, son. A man's actions speak louder than his reputation. You keep on like this, and I think you will find Oro Grande can be more welcoming than it first appeared. After the marshal left, Victoria saw the relief in Jackson's shoulders, the way he exhaled as if he had been holding his breath. That was unexpected. You have earned it, Victoria said. You have shown this town who you really are. Have I shown you? The question was quiet, but there was weight behind it. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who had been beaten down by circumstances and other people's judgments, but had refused to let it break him. She saw kindness and strength, loneliness and hope. She saw someone who understood what it meant to be labeled and dismissed, who kept going anyway. Yes, she said softly, you have. The air between them shifted, charged with something new and frightening and wonderful. Jackson took a step closer, then stopped himself. Victoria, I know your husband has not been gone long. I know you are still grieving, and I would never presume to rush you or push for something you are not ready for. But I need you to know that I have come to care for you a great deal. These past weeks, talking with you, seeing you, it has been the best part of my days. Victoria's breath caught. She had not expected this, or maybe she had been expecting it but had not let herself believe it could really happen. Jackson, people have said things to me, terrible things, about how I am too broken now, too damaged for anyone to want. My husband's sister told me I am hollow, that grief has ruined me. Jackson's face darkened with anger, but his voice remained gentle when he spoke. She is wrong. You are not broken, Victoria. You are grieving, which is natural and right for someone who lost a person they loved. But grief does not make you damaged. It makes you human. What if she is right, though? What if I am too shattered to be what anyone needs? Jackson reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, and the touch sent electricity up her arm. Then we will heal together, every single day. I am not asking you to be perfect or whole or anything other than who you are. I have my own broken places, Victoria. We all do. But maybe, if you are willing, we could help each other mend, one day at a time. Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks, the first she had allowed herself to cry since the funeral. Jackson pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean against his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong beneath her ear. He held her while she cried, not trying to shush her or tell her everything would be fine, just offering his presence and his strength. When the tears finally subsided, Victoria pulled back enough to look up at him. I am afraid. I lost Thomas and it nearly destroyed me. What if I let myself care for you and something happens? Then you will grieve, and I will grieve if something happens to you, because that is what love demands. But the alternative is living half a life, always holding back, and I do not think either of us wants that. Jackson cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away the remaining tears. I will not promise that nothing bad will ever happen, because I cannot control fate. But I will promise that every day we have, I will choose you. I will work to be worthy of your trust and your heart. And I will remind you, as many times as you need to hear it, that you are not broken. You are beautiful and strong and brave. Victoria felt something inside her chest crack open, the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. Every single day, Jackson confirmed. We will heal together step by step. There is no rush, no expectation, just us figuring out how to be whole again. She kissed him then, a soft press of lips that tasted of salt and hope. Jackson made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, his arms tightening around her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria felt alive in a way she had not since before Thomas died. "I care for you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I do. We will be terrified together then." That evening, Victoria told Jackson about the conversation with Margaret, about all the poisonous words that had been spoken over her husband's grave. Jackson listened, his jaw tight with suppressed anger, and when she finished, he took both her hands in his. "Those words were cruel and untrue. You are not to anything, Victoria. You are exactly right, exactly enough, and anyone who cannot see that is blind." Over the following weeks, Jackson and Victoria grew closer. He began work on his homestead, riding out at dawn to clear land and begin construction of a small house. Victoria would pack him lunches, meals wrapped in cloth that he would take with him, and he would return each evening to tell her about his progress. The house was simple, just 2 rooms to start, but he built it with care and pride. The town gradually accepted their courtship. Some people whispered, saying it was too soon after Thomas's death, but Marshal Taggart shut down the gossip firmly when he heard it in the saloon one night. "Mrs. Walsh deserves happiness, and Strickland has proven himself a decent man. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." Christmas came with snow dusting the mountains and a community celebration in the church. Jackson gave Victoria a pair of leather gloves he had made himself, the stitching careful and even. Victoria gave him a new hat, quality felt that had cost most of her savings. They sat together during the service, his hand holding hers, and Victoria felt peace settle over her like a blanket. In January, Jackson finished the house. It was modest but solid, with a good roof and a stone fireplace that drew properly. He showed it to Victoria on a cold afternoon, pride evident in his voice as he pointed out the features. "The bedroom is in the back, so it stays warmer in winter. The front room has windows facing east for morning light. There is a root cellar under the kitchen for storage." "It is wonderful, Jackson." He turned to her, suddenly serious. "I built it for us. If you will have me, that is. I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I love you, Victoria. I have loved you since the day you stood up for a stranger with a shotgun in your hands. I want to marry you if you will say yes. I want to build a life here with you, raise children if we are blessed with them, grow old together." Victoria's heart soared. She had thought she would never feel this way again, this overwhelming certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Yes, yes, Jackson, I will marry you." He swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing, and then he was kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with joy. "We can have a long engagement if you want, do this properly." "I do not want to wait," Victoria said firmly. "I have already lost time to grief and fear. I do not want to lose any more. Let us marry soon, start our life together." They were married in February in the same church where they had celebrated Christmas. Victoria wore a simple blue dress, the nicest thing she owned, and Jackson wore a new suit he had purchased from the tailor. Marshal Taggart stood as a witness, along with Mrs. Henderson, who cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. Even Margaret Walsh attended, though she sat in the back and left immediately after. The reception was held at the saloon, Robert Hayes having offered the space free of charge in a gesture of goodwill. The whole town turned out, bringing food and gifts, and there was music and dancing until late in the evening. When Jackson and Victoria finally left to ride out to their new home, they were showered with rice and well wishes. The house was cold when they arrived, but Jackson quickly built up the fire while Victoria lit lamps. When the room was warm and bright, they stood facing each other, suddenly shy despite all the time they had spent together. "I love you," Jackson said, breaking the silence. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you know it. I love you too." Victoria went to him, and he gathered her close. "Thank you for seeing past the broken places." "There are no broken places," Jackson murmured against her hair. "Just scars that prove you survived." "You are the strongest person I know, Victoria Strickland." Hearing her new name on his lips made Victoria smile. She looked up at him, this man who had offered her healing and hope when she thought she had none left. "Every single day." "Every single day," he promised. And then he kissed her, and they began the first night of their life together. The early months of marriage were an adjustment. Victoria had to learn the rhythms of the homestead, how to care for the chickens Jackson had purchased, how to help with the cattle he was slowly acquiring. Jackson had to learn to share his space and his life, to talk about his worries instead of carrying them alone. They had disagreements, moments of frustration when tiredness or stress made them short with each other. But they had also promised to heal together, and that meant working through the difficult times as well as enjoying the good ones. In March, Victoria missed her monthly courses. She waited another week to be certain, then told Jackson one evening as they sat by the fire. His face went through a series of expressions, shock, joy, wonder, before he pulled her into his arms. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Victoria asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy." "Victoria, I am beyond happy. I am amazed. You have given me so much already, and now this." He placed a hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was not easy. Victoria suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable and swollen. Jackson was patient and attentive, bringing her cool water, fanning her when she could not sleep, rubbing her aching feet at the end of long days. He took over more of the household chores, insisting she rest as much as possible. "You are carrying our child," he said when she protested. "That is work enough." In August, Victoria went into labor during the hottest part of the day. Jackson rode for the midwife, Mrs. Chen, who arrived with her daughter to assist. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when Jackson feared he would lose them both. He paced outside the bedroom, praying to a God he had not spoken to in years, bargaining and pleading for their safety. When he finally heard the baby's cry, thin and indignant, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Chen emerged a few minutes later, smiling. "You have a son. Big, healthy boy. Your wife did very well." Jackson rushed into the bedroom to find Victoria propped up on pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. When she looked up at him, her eyes were full of tears and joy. "Jackson, meet your son." He approached slowly, almost afraid to touch something so small and perfect. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was screaming with impressive lung power. Jackson reached out a tentative finger, and tiny fist wrapped around it with surprising strength. "He is perfect. You are perfect." Jackson kissed Victoria's forehead, then her lips. "Thank you. Thank you for this gift for our son." They named him Thomas James, honoring both Victoria's first husband and Jackson's heritage. Little Tommy, as they called him, had his mother's blue eyes and his father's determined chin. He was a good baby, generally content unless hungry or wet, and he brought a new dimension of joy to the homestead. Victoria healed slowly from the birth, and Jackson took over even more of the work, hiring a young man from town to help with the cattle so he could stay closer to the house. He learned to change diapers and swaddle the baby, to walk the floor at night when Tommy was fussy, to give Victoria breaks so she could sleep or simply have a moment to herself. "You are a natural father," Victoria told him one evening, watching him rock Tommy to sleep. "I had no idea I could love something this much." Jackson admitted. "It is terrifying and wonderful all at once." As Tommy grew from infant to baby, the homestead prospered. Jackson's herd increased, and he gained a reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle. Victoria started a garden that provided vegetables for their table and extras to sell in town. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. On Tommy's first birthday, they hosted a celebration at the homestead. Friends from town came out, bringing gifts and food, and there was music and laughter as Tommy smashed cake into his face with evident delight. Marshal Taggart gave a toast, thanking Jackson and Victoria for proving that people could overcome hard beginnings and build something good. Later that night, after everyone had gone and Tommy was asleep in his cradle, Jackson and Victoria sat on the porch watching the stars. She leaned against his shoulder, content and peaceful. "You remember what you said to me that day in the general store?" she asked. "About healing together every single day." "I remember everything about that day. You kept your promise. Every single day you have chosen me, chosen us. You have reminded me that I am not broken, that I am worthy of love and happiness. You have given me a life I never thought I could have again." Jackson turned to face her, his eyes serious. "You gave me just as much, Victoria. You saw me when everyone else only saw my past. You gave me a chance when I did not deserve one. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. We healed each other just like I said we would." "Every single day," Victoria whispered. "Every single day," Jackson agreed, and he kissed her under the stars in front of the house they had built together, with their son sleeping peacefully inside. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. There was a drought one summer that tested their resources and their spirits. Tommy fell ill with a fever that had them both terrified until it finally broke. Jackson broke his arm helping a neighbor rescue cattle from a flash flood. Victoria had 2 miscarriages that broke her heart and made her fear she would never give Tommy a sibling. Through it all, they held to their promise. Every morning, Jackson would pull Victoria close and remind her that he chose her, that they would face whatever came together. Every evening, Victoria would tell Jackson how grateful she was for him, for the life they had built, for his steady presence beside her. When Tommy was 4 years old, Victoria realized she was pregnant again. She was afraid to hope, afraid to believe this time would be different, but Jackson held her hands and told her they would take it one day at a time, together. The pregnancy progressed slowly but steadily, and in the spring, Victoria delivered a healthy baby girl they named Sarah Elizabeth. Sarah was different from Tommy in every way. Where he had been calm and easy, she was energetic and demanding. Where he had been content to observe, she wanted to be in the middle of everything. She kept them on their toes and filled the house with noise and laughter. Tommy adored his little sister, protective and gentle despite his young age. Jackson would find him sitting beside her cradle, telling her stories or singing the songs Victoria had sung to him. It melted Victoria's heart every time. The homestead continued to grow. Jackson added more rooms to the house as the children got older, built a proper barn, and acquired more land. Victoria's garden expanded into a small orchard, apple and peach trees that would take years to mature but promised future abundance. They hired help during busy seasons, providing jobs for young men trying to make their way in the territory. Margaret Walsh came to visit when Sarah was 2 years old. She had remarried and moved to Santa Fe, and time had softened some of her sharp edges. She held her niece awkwardly, unused to children, and watched Tommy chase chickens around the yard. "You have built a good life here," she said to Victoria, and there was no malice in her voice, only observation. "I have been very fortunate." Margaret looked at her for a long moment. "I said terrible things to you at the funeral. Cruel, untrue things. I was angry at the world for taking my brother, and I took that anger out on you. I am sorry, Victoria. You were never broken. You were grieving, and you deserved compassion, not condemnation. Victoria felt old wounds begin to finally close. Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. Jackson is a good man. Thomas would have approved, I think. He would have wanted you to be happy. After Margaret left, Victoria told Jackson about the conversation. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Do you still think about him? Thomas. Sometimes, Victoria admitted. I will always care about him, always be grateful for what we had, even if it was brief. But he is part of my past, Jackson. You are my present and my future, you and our children. I hope he knows, wherever he is, that I have taken good care of you, that I love you more than anything in this world. I think he knows, Victoria said softly, and I think he would be grateful. When Tommy turned 8, he started school in town. Jackson would drive him in the wagon each morning and pick him up each afternoon, the journey taking nearly an hour each way. Sarah would go along for the ride, chattering constantly, keeping her father entertained. Eventually, when Sarah was old enough, she joined her brother in school, and the house felt strangely empty during the days. Victoria used the quiet time to develop new skills. She learned to preserve food in jars, a technique another ranch wife taught her. She began making soap to sell in town, developing recipes using herbs from her garden that left the soap smelling of lavender and mint. The extra income was modest but added to their savings, providing a cushion against lean times. Jackson expanded his cattle operation, partnering with several other ranchers to drive a herd to market in Kansas. The trip took nearly 3 months, and Victoria worried every day he was gone, but when he returned, he brought enough profit to buy more land and upgrade their equipment. He also brought gifts, a bolt of fine fabric for Victoria, books for the children, and candy that they rationed carefully to make last. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Victoria with a trip to Santa Fe. They left the children with the Hendersons, who had become like family over the years, and spent 3 days in the territorial capital. They stayed in a real hotel with a dining room that served meals on china plates. They attended a concert at the theater, the first live music Victoria had heard besides church hymns and saloon pianists. They walked the streets hand in hand, browsing shops and watching people from all over the world pass by. On their last evening, they sat in the hotel room and Jackson pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, gold set with a small sapphire. I never properly gave you an engagement ring, he said. We married so quickly, and I did not have much money. But I have been saving, and I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that represents what you mean to me. Victoria's eyes filled with tears as he slipped the ring on her finger. Jackson, you did not have to do this. I know, I wanted to. You are my wife, the mother of my children, my best friend, and the love of my life. You deserve to have something that shows the world how precious you are to me. She kissed him then, and they made love slowly, taking their time, relearning the contours of each other's bodies without the exhaustion of farm work and the interruption of children. It was sweet and intense, a reminder that underneath the responsibilities and the daily grind, they were still the two people who had found each other when they were both alone and hurting. The journey back to Oro Grande felt too short. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the way only long married couples can be. When they arrived home, the children ran out to greet them, and Tommy complained that Mrs. Henderson had made them go to bed too early, and Sarah showed them a picture she had drawn of the family, everyone holding hands in front of the house. Life settled back into its familiar rhythms. Tommy showed an aptitude for working with animals, spending hours with the horses, learning to train them with patience and kindness. Sarah was drawn to growing things, helping her mother in the garden, learning the names of plants and their uses. Jackson taught them both to read the land, to understand weather patterns and animal behavior, the skills they would need to survive and thrive in this harsh but beautiful territory. When Tommy was 14 and Sarah was 10, Victoria discovered she was pregnant again. The pregnancy was unexpected and higher risk given her age, now 38, but the baby grew strong and healthy. In the winter, during a rare snowstorm that blanketed the valley in white, Victoria delivered another son. They named him Daniel Joseph, and he was a calm, watchful baby who seemed to take everything in with solemn gray eyes inherited from his father. Tommy and Sarah were old enough to help with their baby brother, and they did so with enthusiasm. Tommy would carry Daniel around the homestead, showing him the animals and talking to him about the ranch. Sarah sang to him constantly, making up songs about clouds and chickens, and the dog that Jackson had acquired to help with the cattle. Jackson was even more protective of Victoria during her recovery this time, insisting she rest and let him and the older children handle most of the work. "We nearly have this perfect life, and I am not taking any chances with you," he said when she protested. "We already have a perfect life," Victoria corrected. "We have had it since the day we married." As the children grew, the homestead became a stopping point for travelers moving through the territory. Victoria gained a reputation for hospitality, always willing to provide a meal or a place to sleep in the barn for those passing through. Jackson was known for his integrity, his willingness to help neighbors, and his skill with cattle and horses. They had become pillars of the community, respected and valued. Marshal Taggart retired when Tommy was 16, and to everyone's surprise, he recommended Jackson to replace him. At first, Jackson refused. "I am a rancher, not a lawman." "You are a man people trust," Taggart countered. "You are fair, you keep your head in a crisis, and you understand that sometimes the law needs to bend a little to serve justice. That is what this town needs." After much discussion with Victoria, Jackson agreed to take the position, but only part-time. He would handle law enforcement duties in town 2 days a week, and the rest of the time he would work the ranch. It was an unusual arrangement, but it worked. Crime in Oro Grande was rarely serious anyway, mostly disputes between neighbors or the occasional drunk causing problems at the saloon. The added income from the marshal position allowed them to make further improvements to the homestead. They added a proper dining room to the house, a workshop for Jackson where he could work on leatherwork during the winter months, and a study where the children could do schoolwork without distraction. They were prospering in ways Victoria had never imagined possible during those dark days after Thomas's death. On the 15th anniversary of their meeting, not their wedding but the day Victoria had stepped outside the general store with a shotgun to defend a stranger, Jackson took her back to that spot. The store had changed hands several years earlier when the Hendersons retired to live with their daughter, but the building was the same. "You remember what you thought when you saw me that day?" Jackson asked. Victoria considered. "I thought you looked tired. Tired and alone and resigned to being unwelcome. I saw someone who had been judged unfairly, and it made me angry because I knew how that felt." "I thought you were an angel," Jackson said. "This beautiful woman with fire in her eyes, standing up for someone she did not know. I rode away that night and I could not stop thinking about you. That is why I came back. I told myself it was because I was tired of running, but the truth was, I wanted to see you again. I wanted to know if you were real or if I had imagined someone that brave and kind." I am not an angel, Jackson. I am just a woman who was lucky enough to find you. We found each other." Jackson took her hands. "And every day since, we have built this life together. You told me once that people said you were too broken to be wanted. I told you we would heal together every single day. Have I kept that promise? You have kept it every day for 15 years. You have shown me what it means to be truly loved, to be chosen and cherished. You have given me children and a home and a life beyond anything I dreamed possible. And you have done the same for me. You saw past my mistakes and my reputation. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You made me a husband and a father and a better man than I ever thought I could be." Jackson pulled her close. "I love you, Victoria Strickland. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They kissed there on the street where they had first truly seen each other, and Victoria felt the same spark she had felt all those years ago. Some things, the important things, never changed. Tommy grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's compassion and sense of fairness. When he was 18, he announced his intention to expand the ranching operation, to acquire more land in the northern valleys where water was plentiful. Jackson backed his vision, providing capital and guidance while letting Tommy take the lead. It was the beginning of what would eventually become one of the most successful ranching operations in the territory. Sarah, at 14, was showing signs of becoming a healer. She had learned about medicinal plants from Mrs. Chen, who had become a mentor and friend, and she had a natural gift for understanding sickness and knowing what treatments to apply. Victoria encouraged her daughter's interests, knowing that the territory desperately needed people with medical knowledge. Daniel, now 8, was the quiet observer of the family, always watching, always thinking. He loved books and learning, devouring everything he could get his hands on. Jackson built him shelves in the study to hold his growing collection of volumes, purchases made during trips to Santa Fe or ordered from catalogs back east. The homestead had become more than just a ranch. It was a legacy, something they had built together that would outlive them, passed down through their children and their children's children. On Sunday evenings, the family would gather in the main room and Jackson would tell stories of the old days, of how he and Victoria had met, of the struggles and triumphs they had experienced together. "Never forget," he would tell the children, "that your mother was the bravest person I ever met. When the world told her she was broken and worthless, she refused to believe it. She chose to live, to love, to build something good. That is real strength." Victoria would protest that Jackson was exaggerating, but the children loved the stories, and she secretly loved that her husband still saw her that way after all these years. When Victoria turned 45, Jackson planned a grand celebration. He invited everyone they had ever known in the territory, and people came from hundreds of miles away to attend. There was a feast that lasted all afternoon, music and dancing that continued into the night. People gave speeches, sharing memories and expressing gratitude for the ways Jackson and Victoria had touched their lives. Margaret Walsh came all the way from Santa Fe with her husband and children. She spoke during the celebration, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Many years ago, I said terrible things to my sister-in-law. I told her she was too broken to be loved, too damaged for any decent man to want. I have spent the years since watching her prove me wrong in every possible way. Victoria Walsh Strickland is one of the strongest, most resilient women I have ever known. She has built a life of beauty and purpose from ashes and grief. She has raised wonderful children, supported her community, and loved her husband with a devotion that is inspiring to witness. I was wrong about her, and I am grateful she had the grace to forgive me. Happy birthday, Victoria, May you have many more years of health and happiness." The crowd applauded, and Victoria stood to embrace Margaret, both women crying. It was a moment of healing that had been decades in the making, the final closing of a wound that had hurt for far too long. That night, long after the guests had departed, Jackson and Victoria lay in bed, exhausted but content. Daniel was asleep in his room. Tommy and Sarah had their own small houses on the property now, close enough to be part of the family but with their own space and independence. "Did you have a good day?" Jackson asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "The best. Thank you for arranging all of that, for inviting everyone, for making me feel so loved and valued." "You are loved and valued, by me most of all, but also by this community we helped build. We have done good work here, Victoria. Not just raising cattle and growing food, but creating a place where people can belong, where they are judged by their character rather than their past." Victoria turned to face him, studying his face in the dim light from the window. He was 53 now, his dark hair threaded with gray, lines etched around his eyes and mouth from years of sun and wind and laughter. He was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "You remember what you told me the day you proposed. You said you wanted to grow old with me." "I remember every word I have ever spoken to you. We are doing it, growing old together, building this life day by day just like you promised." Jackson kissed her softly. "Every single day. That was always the promise, and I have never wavered from it, not once, not for a moment." "Neither have I." They made love slowly, gently, their bodies familiar and beloved to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Victoria thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From widow to wife, from broken to whole, from alone to surrounded by family and love. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. The years continued to pass, marked by milestones and ordinary moments alike. Tommy married a woman named Rebecca from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Jackson and Victoria their first grandchild, a boy they named Jackson Thomas. Sarah went to study medicine in Santa Fe, one of the first women to do so, and returned to Oro Grande to practice, providing medical care to the community. Daniel won a scholarship to a university back east, where he studied law and literature before returning home to open a practice in Oro Grande. All three children thrived, and all three credited their parents with giving them the foundation and support they needed to pursue their dreams. They would tell their own children stories about the grandmother who had stood up to an angry mob with a shotgun, about the grandfather who had been judged unfairly but won people over through patience and integrity. When Jackson turned 60, he officially retired from his martial duties, handing the badge to a younger man who had trained under him. He spent more time at the ranch, working with Tommy to continue expanding the operation, teaching his grandchildren to ride and rope and read the land. Victoria slowed down as well, though she still maintained her garden and her soap-making business. She spent hours with her grandchildren, telling them stories, teaching them songs, passing down the recipes and skills she had accumulated over a lifetime. She and Jackson would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the valley they had claimed and tamed, and count their blessings. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. All of their grandchildren were there, along with friends and neighbors from throughout the region. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears, a reaffirmation of vows that Jackson and Victoria spoke to each other in front of everyone they loved. 30 years ago, I married the woman who saved my life, Jackson said, his voice strong despite his age. Not because she pulled me from a fire or nursed me through illness, but because she saw value in me when no one else did. She gave me hope and purpose and love. She gave me a family and a home and a reason to keep going when things were hard. Victoria, you are my heart and my soul. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you for all the days I have left and beyond." Victoria's voice shook with emotion when she spoke. "Jackson once told me that we would heal together, every single day. It seemed impossible at the time. I was drowning in grief and convinced I had nothing left to give. But he saw something in me I could not see in myself. He was patient when I needed patience, strong when I needed strength, gentle when I needed gentleness. He has been my partner in every sense of the word, working beside me to build this life. I love you, Jackson. Thank you for every single day we have had together." They kissed, and their family and friends erupted in applause and cheers. It was a moment of pure joy, a celebration of a love that had endured and deepened over 3 decades. Later that night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Jackson and Victoria walked out to the spot where the old barn had been, the place where Jackson had first stayed when he came to Oro Grande. A new, much larger barn stood there now, but they could still remember the rough structure that had provided shelter in those early days. "You ever think about how different our lives could have been?" Victoria asked. "If I had not stepped outside that day, if you had kept riding, if we had never met." "I try not to," Jackson admitted. "It is too frightening to imagine. I was so lost back then, so tired of fighting and running. I think if you had not given me a reason to stay, I would have just kept drifting until I disappeared completely. And I would have stayed trapped in grief, convinced that I was too broken to ever be happy again. We saved each other, Jackson. We healed each other," he corrected. "Every single day, just like I promised." They stood there under the stars, holding hands, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life together in the light. The homestead spread out around them, buildings and fences and fields that represented decades of work and love. In the houses nearby, their children slept with their own families. The legacy they had created would continue long after they were gone. "I would choose you again," Victoria said quietly. "If I had to live my life over, knowing all the pain and loss, I would still choose you. Every time." "And I would choose you," Jackson replied, "every single day for all eternity." They walked back to the house hand in hand. Two people who had proven that love could heal the deepest wounds, that two broken people could make each other whole, and that promises kept day by day could build a life of beauty and meaning. The lights in the house welcomed them home, and they went inside together, ready for whatever days remained, knowing they would face them side by side, healing and loving and choosing each other, every single day. The years grew shorter as Jackson and Victoria entered their 70s. Jackson's joints ached in cold weather, and Victoria's eyesight dimmed, requiring spectacles for reading. But they adapted, supporting each other through the changes that age brought, just as they had supported each other through every other challenge. Tommy managed the ranch now, with Rebecca beside him and their 3 children learning the trade. Sarah practiced medicine in town, married to a teacher who supported her unconventional career. Daniel had become a judge, traveling the circuit to dispense justice in small towns throughout the territory. All 3 visited often, bringing grandchildren who filled the house with noise and energy. On a spring morning when Victoria was 73, she woke to find Jackson watching her with an expression she knew well, the look of absolute love and devotion he had given her for decades. "Good morning," she murmured, reaching for his hand. "Good morning, my love." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Did you sleep well?" "I always sleep well beside you." They rose slowly, helping each other as they had learned to do and prepared for the day. Jackson made coffee while Victoria gathered eggs from the chickens, a task she still insisted on doing herself. They ate breakfast on the porch, watching the sun rise over the valley, painting the mountains gold and orange. "You have regrets?" Jackson asked suddenly. "About anything?" Victoria considered the question carefully. "I regret that Thomas died so young that he never got to see the life I built afterward, but I do not regret loving you or the life we made together. Not for a moment. My only regret is that I did not meet you sooner, that we did not have even more years together. But I am grateful for the time we have had. You made me a better man, Victoria. You gave my life meaning. You did the same for me." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping coffee and watching the world wake up around them. This was their favorite time of day, these quiet morning moments before the demands of life intruded. They had learned to treasure these pockets of peace, to appreciate the simple gift of being together. Tommy arrived mid-morning with news that one of the horses was about to foal. Jackson insisted on being present for the birth, though Tommy worried about his father spending hours in the barn. "I have been delivering foals since before you were born," Jackson said firmly. "I am not too old to help yet." Victoria went with him, and they spent the afternoon in the barn, watching and waiting, ready to assist if needed. The mare did well, delivering a healthy filly with a white blaze on her forehead. Jackson helped clean the foal while Victoria made sure the mother was comfortable, the two of them working together with the ease of long practice. "She is beautiful," Victoria said, watching the filly struggle to her feet on wobbly legs. "Strong like her mother." "All females are strong," Jackson said, giving Victoria a meaningful look. "Some are just better at hiding it than others." That evening, surrounded by family at dinner, Jackson stood and raised his glass. "I want to say something. I am not a young man anymore, and I know my time is limited. But I want everyone here to know that I have lived a blessed life. I found love when I thought I was unworthy of it. I built a home when I thought I would always be a drifter. I raised children I am proud of, and I have watched them raise children who are equally remarkable. All of this is because of your mother, because she saw something in me worth saving and had the courage to take a chance on a man with a questionable past." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Jackson, we saved each other. Perhaps, but you did it first. You stood up for me when you had every reason to protect yourself. You loved me when I was difficult to love. You healed me, Victoria, and I have spent every day since trying to deserve you. You have more than deserved me. You have given me everything." The family raised their glasses in a toast, voices mingling in expressions of love and gratitude. Later, after everyone had left and they were alone again, Victoria and Jackson sat by the fireplace, her head resting on his shoulder. "I meant what I said," Jackson murmured. "About knowing my time is limited. I can feel it, Victoria. My body is wearing out. Do not talk like that. It is not morbid, just honest. I am not afraid of dying. I have had a full life, a happy life. My only sorrow is that I will have to leave you." Victoria sat up to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "I cannot imagine this world without you in it. You will be fine. You are the strongest person I know, and you will have our children and grandchildren to support you. They love you so much. I love you more." Jackson pulled her close, holding her tight. "I love you more than life itself, Victoria Strickland. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Promise me you will keep living after I am gone. Keep loving and laughing and being the remarkable woman you have always been." "I promise, but only if you promise to stay with me as long as you possibly can." "Every single day I have left," Jackson vowed. "Every single one." 5 years passed and Jackson kept his promise. He slowed down but never stopped, still helping with the ranch work when he could, still sitting beside Victoria on the porch every morning, still choosing her every single day. They celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary surrounded by family. A quieter affair than some of the previous milestones, but no less meaningful. That winter was harsh, with snow that piled high and temperatures that dipped below zero. Jackson caught a cold that settled in his chest and would not clear. Sarah did everything she could, applying all her medical knowledge, but his body was simply too worn out to fight. He weakened steadily, and they all knew the end was approaching. Victoria rarely left his bedside. She held his hand, talked to him about their life together, reminded him of all the beautiful moments they had shared. Their children and grandchildren visited daily, saying their goodbyes, thanking him for the legacy he had built. On a morning in early February, Jackson woke and seemed clearer than he had in days. He looked at Victoria with eyes that were still that same stormy gray she had fallen in love with so many years ago. "Every single day," he whispered. "Every single day," Victoria replied, understanding. "We healed together, just like you promised. Best decision I ever made staying in Oro Grande. Best thing I ever did loving you. Best thing I ever did loving you back." Jackson smiled, and Victoria saw in that smile the young cowboy who had ridden into town with nothing but a horse and hope. "Not broken," he murmured. "Never were. You were perfect all along." "So were you." He closed his eyes, still smiling, still holding her hand. His breathing slowed and then stopped, peaceful and painless. Victoria sat with him for a long time, memorizing his face, saying goodbye to the man who had saved her and let her save him in return. The funeral was well attended, people coming from across the territory to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and loved. Victoria stood by the grave with her children on either side, watching as they lowered Jackson into the earth beside the plot reserved for her. When it was her turn to speak, she kept it simple. "Jackson told me once that we would heal together, every single day. He kept that promise for 37 years. He loved me when I thought I was too broken to be loved. He saw strength in me when I felt nothing but weakness. He built this life with me, raised these children with me, grew old beside me. He was the best man I ever knew, and I will miss him for the rest of my days. But I am not broken by this loss. He taught me that grief and love are two sides of the same coin, and I would rather feel this pain than never have loved him at all. Thank you, Jackson, for every single day. I will carry you in my heart until we meet again." The years after Jackson's death were difficult but not unbearable. Victoria had meant what she said at the funeral. She was not broken by the loss. She grieved deeply, missing his presence constantly, but she also celebrated the life they had built and the love they had shared. She stayed in the house they had made together, maintained the routines they had established, and found comfort in her family. Tommy ensured his mother wanted for nothing, and Sarah visited daily to check on her health. Daniel wrote long letters from wherever his circuit took him, sharing stories and memories. The grandchildren came often, sitting with their grandmother while she told stories about their grandfather, about how he had once been a stranger no one wanted but had proved himself through patience and integrity. On what would have been their 40th wedding anniversary, Victoria walked out to Jackson's grave. She brought wildflowers from the valley, the kind he had always loved, and sat beside the stone marker that bore his name. 40 years, she said aloud. Well, 37 married, but I count from the day we met, the day you changed my life. I miss you every single day, Jackson. I miss your voice and your laugh and the way you always knew how to make me feel safe. I miss waking up beside you and falling asleep in your arms. But I am not broken, my love. You taught me that I was never broken, just hurt, and that hurt could heal. You were right. I healed because of you, and I am still healing even without you here. A breeze stirred the flowers, and Victoria chose to believe it was Jackson's way of acknowledging her words. She sat there for a long time, talking to him about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch that Tommy had expanded even further, about Sarah's work and Daniel's career. She told him about the great-grandchildren who were starting to arrive, the next generation of the legacy they had created together. "I will come to you eventually," she said as she prepared to leave. "But not yet. I promised I would keep living, and I am keeping that promise. Just like you kept yours. Every single day, Jackson. We healed together, every single day." Victoria lived another 7 years after Jackson's death, years filled with family and purpose. She saw her grandchildren marry and begin their own families. She held great-grandchildren in her arms and told them stories about their great-grandfather, the cowboy who had stayed when everyone else wanted him to leave. She kept the garden going and made soap that people still sought out for its quality and fragrance. On a summer evening when she was 83, Victoria felt a tightness in her chest. She was sitting on the porch, the same porch where she and Jackson had spent countless mornings and evenings together. She looked out at the valley painted gold by the setting sun, and she felt at peace. Sarah was with her, having stopped by for dinner, and immediately recognized the signs. "Mama, let me get help." "No," Victoria said gently. "It is time, sweetheart. I have had a long, full life. I am ready to go to him." "We are not ready to lose you. You will never lose me. I am in this land, in this house, in every one of you. I am in the stories you will tell your children about me and about your father. We do not truly die as long as we are remembered and loved." Sarah held her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for everything you taught me. About strength and resilience and love. Thank you for being such a wonderful daughter. Tell your brothers I love them. Tell all my grandchildren and great-grandchildren that I love them. And tell them about Jackson and me, about how 2 broken people healed each other, every single day." Victoria closed her eyes, and the last thing she thought of was Jackson's voice promising that they would heal together. She felt his presence beside her, could almost feel his hand in hers, and then the world faded away and she opened her eyes to find him standing there, young and strong and smiling. "Took you long enough," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered. "I promised I would keep living." "And you did. You kept all your promises, Victoria, just like I kept mine." He took her hand, and together they walked into whatever came next, 2 souls who had found each other across time and pain and had built something beautiful that would echo through generations. Behind them, in the world they left, their family gathered to mourn and remember, to honor the legacy of love and healing that Jackson and Victoria Strickland had created together. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through Tommy's line, each generation adding to what had come before. Sarah's descendants became doctors and nurses, serving their communities with the same dedication she had shown. Daniel's children and grandchildren became lawyers and teachers, carrying forward his love of justice and learning. And every generation told the story of their ancestors. The widow who was told she was too broken, and the cowboy who said they would heal together every single day. It became a family legend, a reminder that love could overcome any obstacle, that 2 wounded people could make each other whole, and that healing was not a destination but a journey taken one day at a time together. In Oro Grande, now a thriving town rather than a rough settlement, there was a park named after Jackson and Victoria Strickland. A bronze statue stood in the center, depicting them as they had been in their middle years, standing side by side, her hand in his, looking toward the future with hope and determination. The plaque at the base reads simply, "They healed together every single day." And that was the truth that endured, the legacy that mattered. Not the land they had accumulated or the wealth they had built, but the love they had chosen every single day, against all odds and in the face of every hardship. They had proven that broken was not the same as beyond repair, that grief did not have to be the end of the story, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was to love again, when everyone said it was impossible. Their story became a beacon for others who felt broken, a reminder that healing was possible, that love could be found even in the hardest places, and that two people, committed to choosing each other every single day, could build something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. It was a story of hope and resilience, of second chances and hard-won happiness, and it lived on in the hearts of everyone who heard it, inspiring them to believe in healing, in love, and in the power of choosing someone every single day, without exception or hesitation. The sun set over Oro Grande, casting long shadows across the park and the statue, and in those shadows, if someone looked carefully, they might see two figures walking hand in hand, forever together, forever healing, forever choosing each other every single day.